Namaste. Welcome back, beautiful souls. Lovely to have you here. Today is going to be a top 3 video, and this is divided into 2 parts. The first part will be classic Waite-Smith decks, and the second part will be recolored Waite-Smith decks. And I want to thank you all so much for all of your comments and your contributions to the polls that I have recently posted. So let's get straight to the decks. In the number 3 position is the plaid back deck, and this is currently available in this yellow box with the magician on the cover labeled the Rider Tarot deck. This is the same deck that was previously printed in a blue box with the World card on the cover. And you can see here it was published jointly, I believe, with Ryder and Company in London and US Games, and is quite easy to find on eBay with a great range of prices. You can see one here for 125 GBP, and here is the same deck for 700 euros, and another one for 600 Canadian dollars. Depending on the year your deck is from, the brightness of the color will vary. I have a currently printed deck, which I have in hand, as well as a copy that is just over 30 years old. And the 30-year-old one, not from fading, but from printing, is the yellows aren't quite as yellow. The paper in this particular deck, if you have the Centennial Waite-Smith, this is thinner cardstock. I would say like a Llewellyn cardstock. Shuffles beautifully. And I have done complete side-by-sides of all of these decks not too long ago on my channel, so you can have a good look at that. And this one, I believe, was voted in 3rd place due to the color. The decks that are in 2nd and 1st place aren't quite as brilliant and bright and appear to be perhaps um, a little more authentic in their tone. In 2nd position is the Tarot of A.E. Waite. This deck comes in a hard 2-part box. It's published by AGM and available in a number of languages. And like the previous deck, depending on the year it was printed, the colors may be slightly different. This deck comes with the authentic brown pebbled backs that would have appeared on the first edition of the Pam A deck. Depending on the language that you purchase the deck in, the font will be slightly different. I do not have an English version of this deck, so I can't tell you if the English version has the hand lettering by Pamela Coleman Smith or not. The colors of this deck are slightly more muted than the previous deck that I showed you. The line work is almost the same, and I have done a side-by-side of this deck with the other ones that are being featured here today. This is same or similar cardstock to the previous deck. Cards are the same size. And one of the reasons that these 3 decks are in the top 3, it appears there have been no alterations in the proportions of the artwork. This was something that I noticed in some other decks, be they borderless or smaller card sizes, that when the proportion of the paintings change, so does the artwork, and that loses some of the authenticity of the work. In first place, both by your vote and my own opinion, is the Smith-Waite Centennial Edition. This is a really lovely version of the deck. The Fool card on the back, and then some of Pamela Coleman Smith's other artwork on the front of the box. Now, this deck is available in various versions. There was a collector's version, there is a deck in a tin, and there is also, I believe, a borderless version. That one I would not recommend. There's something funny in those cards, and I did a side by side some time back with the borderless version of this deck and the bordered version. These are the card backs, and this card stock is a little bit thicker than the previous two decks. If you have other US Games decks, you'll be familiar with this slightly thicker card stock. Both the paper and the color of this deck is a little more muted than the previous deck. And generally speaking, the color tone of the faces is more consistent. With many of the other Waite-Smith versions, the skin tones tend to vary greatly, and in some of the decks that can actually be quite hard to look at. All three of the decks I'm showing you today are quite authentic in the lines, the work of Pamela Coleman Smith, and the original version of the deck known as the Pam A. This is a card I remember from the borderless version, and the proportion gets all skewed. The time that I have spent sharing these decks and reflecting and doing side by sides and comparing is for my own research, but also for consideration for people who are new to the tarot and also maybe have been working with other decks and are finally getting around to working with this classic tarot deck. In third place for the recolored versions of this deck is the Radiant Rider Waite Tarot, also available in a US Games tuck box. The deck was recolored by Virginius Poshkus, and the cardstock is similar to the first two decks that I showed you today, a little bit thinner US Games cardstock. Now, this deck is sold, advertised as a recolored deck. However, if you look carefully, you can see that it is also a redrawn deck. There are a significant number of slight changes to the authentic artwork. However, the colors, the clarity of this deck is very popular and very close to the original artwork. You can see it does not have the Pamela Coleman Smith original lettering on the card. And as with the first three decks, I have done a number of side-by-sides comparing and contrasting the recolored decks as well. And this particular one is a redrawn deck and does not have some of the distinguishing features of the original Pamela Coleman Smith artwork. In second place is the Wiser Tarot, which comes in a hard two-part box, published by Wiser Books. The backs are very pretty. And the cardstock is similar to all of the decks I've shown today, except for the Centennial Tarot, which is a little bit thicker cardstock. The coloring of this deck is really beautiful. It is loosely color coded, so the suit of cups has a blue background. The suit of swords is purple, and if you love purples, you will love this deck. The purples are just beautiful. The suit of pentacles has a green background. And as I've mentioned, I have done several side-by-sides of all of the decks that I'm showing you today. Another lovely feature of this deck is the intentional recoloring of some of the skins, so we have more diversity in this deck. And did I show you the other suit? The suit of wands is a beautiful orange color. And everything feels very authentic in the line art and the way the way the whole deck appears. And here are some of the majors. And if you look at the line work, the extra little squiggles, this is very, very close to the artwork of the original decks. And in first place for the recolor decks is the Universal Waite, recolored by Mary Hanson Roberts, also in a tuck box by US Games. This deck I have photographed in entirety and use it for teaching just for its clarity of the pictures. As I mentioned with the Radiant Waite, there definitely has been some change in the line work. The lines are thinner, and I would say in some cases the redrawing is very, very obvious, and yet it does retain a great deal of authenticity. Authenticity in color, and none of the redrawing really changes much. It just brings in a sense of clarity to the deck. For example, you can see so clearly here the tail of the figure on the left in the devil card, and you may notice things in this deck that you didn't see in the first group of decks that I shared with you because indeed of its clarity. This deck also has the Pamela Coleman Smith lettering on the bottom, which the other two decks did not. This, you can see, doesn't have the line work on the flag. The extra squiggle is not there. So, indeed, there are a number of changes in this deck. And yet, it is a really beautiful recoloring of the Waite-Smith tarot. This has been an amazing journey this month, doing all these side by sides, comparing, contrasting, doing some more research, going back, pulling all these decks out of my library. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate all of the comments that you've offered as well too, and thank you for participating in the polls. What I recommend is that whether you're a beginner or you're coming to this because you have studied the tarot or been reading the tarot for years and decided that you want to have another look at the Waite-Smith tarot, that you select one of the decks that has the more authentic artwork, the lettering of Pamela Coleman Smith, whether it is this yellow box version with the plaid backs, the Centennial Tarot, or the AGM variation with the brown pebble backs. All of these are excellent variations of the Waite-Smith and will give you a really good idea of the line work and the colors, the more authentic colors of this particular tarot, which do have meaning and do have connections. And if you are studying through various websites and reference books, I think it'll be really useful to have one of these three decks on hand to study with. However, if you prefer the recolored decks, maybe the Wiser deck really appeals to you with the color coded suits and the shifts in color of the skin tone, or you like the clarity of the radiant or the universal. I get it. It just might be more appealing to the eye, and I know a lot of people struggle with the thick lines of the original artwork. So purchase one of the recolored decks and have one of the first three that I shared with you as a study deck to compare and contrast. Once again, your feedback is greatly appreciated, and I look forward to your comments in response to this video. Take good care of yourselves. Have a lovely rest of your day. Namaste.